I'm Harry Khachatrian, a contributing writer at the Washington Examiner, and I'm joined today for an interview by a Grammy Award winning artist and the frontman of the band System of a Down, Serj Tankian. Serj and I will discuss music, politics, and culture, and the intersection of all of these. Well, without further ado, here's Serj Tankian. System of a Down was such a fresh sound. I think it was just a big kind of shift in the musical genre in heavy metal in the early 2000s. And then, since then, you've gone on to command such a diverse musical discography. Like you've done, even recently you released a piano concerto, Disarming Time. You had Jazz is Christ. That's a jazz record you did. You've been doing film soundtracks now, for scoring movies for about almost the last decade. So can you go a little bit for me, if you can, into the artistic process of these different projects and how, if you approach them differently, and if at any point you were maybe also thinking that you wanted to, not only create like jazz and piano concertos and classical, but to, maybe push these genres in different directions and, innovate the way you've done in rock music.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Harry, first and foremost, and thank you for having me on. Look, I musically, I've always been a chameleon. I never really stuck to one genre. We came out with System of a Down in this really kind of sporadic hard rock kind of band that, like you said, didn't really match anything else happening at the with our contemporaries at the time, be it new metal or the grunge that preceded it. So I think that's just our musical diversity, just our influences from growing up with Armenian music to growing up in the '70s in the U.S. and from disco to goth to punk to rock to metal to hip hop to everything mixed in, right? Um, I so I think as as a um, let's say 10, 12 years into System of a Down, well, from the beginning actually, even I did a record called Serat with my friend Arto Tunkboyajian, which was very much like a world experimental record, and we put that out in, I want to say, 2002 or something like that, 2001, 2002. um, so I've always kind of, whatever music comes to me in whatever vibe it asks for, is what I try to, how I try to present it, hopefully skillfully. If the vibe is jazz, it's jazz. If the vibe is world, whatever it is. And I've always been interested in doing, I don't think an artist should necessarily stick to one genre, stick to one type of music, or typecast, mold themselves into that. It becomes repetitive, it becomes artistically redundant, irrespective of the dynamics of the artist within that genre, which could be quite diverse, which System of a Down is, to be honest, even if we stayed in that genre. I mean, System of a Down does, I guess, in that rock genre. But personally, I just, I love doing different things. They help me grow as an artist. I started painting years ago because, again, it just helped me grow as an artist, outside of the music world. But spurring from music, my all my paintings are musical paintings. They have musical scores, married by a technological app that does optical recognition, kind of connected to. So I'm always interested in doing something new. I'm always interested in exploring new territory, but kind of, and I'm not afraid. you know a lot of artists are afraid of losing their fans. A lot of artists are afraid of going too far into one direction or another. For me, it's like, I always say, a good chef can make a very expensive, you know dinner at a wonderful high-end restaurant, but they can also make a badass pizza for $5. A good chef should be able to do both.
Mhm. Yeah, it's about the simple things sometimes, right? So I
Yeah,
think
and
just,
some of the stuff that you do, sorry to interrupt, but
oh,
I'll just
no,
finish it with,
please
you
do.
know, I think people are afraid because once they venture too far, people may not follow what they do.
Mhm.
When I put out, for example, a poetry suite with cinematic music behind it, I don't expect people to gravitate toward that in the same streaming numbers as Elasticity, which is a rock record, which is a genre that I'm known for. But I will do all of it. You know, I've put out more classical music and cinematic music this year than anything else. It's because that's what came to me. That's what I finished. That's what I'm putting out. You want it? You, there it is for you. If you don't, that's cool.
Well, so I'm glad you mentioned elasticity. So, as I was actually about to ask you, this was, I guess, your first kind of return to um, maybe, some would say your roots of rock music, almost all close to a decade now. And so I was curious about, doing this project, recording this EP. Did it feel any different now after having gone through all these different genres and experimenting with classical and the poetry suite and painting? Did it feel creatively different to approach rock from a different angle, I guess, after all this time in music?
Um, Not really, because I mean, look, I've been doing rock. The previous rock record I did was Harakiri on Warner,
Mhm.
which was, I think we released it in 2012. While I was working on Harakiri, I was working on Jazz is Christ, the jazz record, and Orca, my symphony, classical symphony. So, it's all, to me, it's just music. It's just the form you put it in. It's the dress you put on.
Mhm.
I'm the same person, right? I'm wearing t-shirt and shorts because
Right.
I'm lugging shit around and I'm sweating, but I can come back in a nice suit. I'm still the same person in a different suit. And to me, musical genres are those clothings that you just change depending on the vibe you want to portray, depending on the emotion that you want to elicit. Um, Simply. So not really. So I think, but what it does is diving into different types of music enriches your um, artistic what is it called, palette, a painter's palette, as you will. You have more colors to play with, and you might choose to use them and you might not. You might stick to very grounded 4 or 5 piece rock ensemble for a rock record, but it does expand your palette. Like, that you can throw in an orchestra if you want. That you can throw in a beautiful trumpet solo if you want, or an oud solo or a duduk or whatever you want to do in ethnic instruments or whatever. You have that because you're doing it. And when it's necessary, you put it in. Like the song "Your Mom" from Elasticity, has this beautiful Arabic breakdown with an oud played by my really good friend Antrani Kazirian. And it's just because it just kind of it wanted that, so you brought that in. Um, yeah.
So I guess the kind of what I was wondering there as well was do you think did your musical palette perhaps expand over the last 10 years of exploring different things, or was it sort of always there? It just hadn't, I guess, been I guess through the film scores you've done and maybe some of the other classical projects, you just hadn't released them yet, but it was always sort of these different ideas that you had from the beginning.
Yeah, I always had the diversity of ideas, but the execution of them and the diving into them definitely is the learning experience and the
Right.
growth experience as an artist. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess just again on music, I was curious if you had any, as an artist, as a composer and writer, and being in music for so long, if you had any specific perhaps thoughts about the general direction of popular music and the culture over the last 20 years of which you've kind of presided over as a musician as well, about not only these different emerging technologies for how we record music going from analog to digital, but also the ways it's delivered, right, going from CDs and cassettes from 80s and 90s obviously to exclusively being on
Yeah.
streaming. Have you found it so, how you've adjusted to all this and how you think of it as from a perspective as an artist?
Um, it's changed drastically within my musical lifetime in the
Mhm.
last 20-25 years. We went from having typical kind of record company structure, brick and mortar distribution, to iTunes coming and taking over the digital market by a software company, hardware company, software company, and then they became, and then streaming took over, and just the whole model of the industry changed, and how you perceive that music changed as well through social media, which didn't exist when we started as a band. So it's revolutionized the industry, whether you consider that a positive thing or a negative thing. It's changed things. It has made it, you know, it has made it difficult for new artists to deal with the chicken and the egg syndrome, which is, how popular can you be on YouTube or on your social media before a label or an investor would be interested in helping you, in partnering up with you,
Mhm.
But that's kind of like how it used to be in the live and physical world. I would always say that if a band or an artist cannot have a local strong following, how are they going to penetrate the world, in terms of music? So it's like that, except now it's on socials. And with obviously the pandemic, it's made the live performance aspect even more difficult for emerging artists. So I think part of that may have contributed to the homogenization of music, possibly,
Mhm.
but there's always been that as well. There's always one artist or band that will create a new sound that becomes extremely popular, and then everyone will try to copy it. It's happened with the Beatles. It's happened with the Stones, with Zeppelin. It's happened with everyone, really. Same with dance music. Same with everything, and that's always going to be the case. I don't know what the evolution of music holds. I don't know where it's going. I don't pretend to know where it's going. I don't think anyone does, and anyone who says they do don't really. So we will just have to take the ride
Yeah.
together and see what happens.
And I guess just off that, and we were talking just a bit earlier, you were saying in the beginning how you've kind of seen yourself as this almost musical chameleon where you're never set in one place. You're always looking to explore new things. Do you find yourself at all? Do you try to see where the trends in music are and try to kind of not necessarily ride the trends, but maybe like do the trends affect what you think of doing next, or are you very much kind of in your own place of what you want to explore musically?
More the latter, I guess. I don't really look at trends. I don't really look at what's popular. If there's an artist that someone turns me on to, or that I hear that I think is really amazing, be they from the 1960s or from the 2020 or from this year, I should say, or this quarter, I would definitely dive into it. But so I don't care what the time period is from, as long as it's quality and it's interesting and it's moving. But I don't look at trends. I don't, I just I just do. Music is a playground for me. I just do, but I do play with new sounds. So instead of looking at trends, what I look at as a composer of film and TV and video games is I look at new type of sounds. Like if I hear a score that's really interesting, I wonder how they came up with that sound. How did they make those strings so kind of delayed or whatever, like, so I explore that, and I try to find a new sound that I can play with in terms of my scoring. Every project that I have, be it for series or for film or anything, I try to find the tone. I try to, after speaking to the director or decision makers, I try to find what that tone is. What is the sound we're looking for? And what is the musical composition emotively for this story? um, and I usually write a suite of music to present, to see if I'm in the ballpark, to see if the director and I are seeing eye to eye. This is what I'm feeling from this, without even seeing any visuals. This is just based on a conversation, maybe a synopsis, maybe a storyboard, whatever they have.
Mhm.
um, and once I land that, half the job is done, because the rest is really, once I land that, then I know what my palette is for that film. I know what my sounds are, and I can compose based on picture or even without.
Mhm. Well, that's how I feel it comes out. I was, I guess, just prior to us talking last night, I was rewatching "I'm Not Alone," the documentary. I'd first seen it when it premiered in TIFF, but and I think rewatching now is paying closer attention, obviously, to the score because I wanted to. We're going to discuss music, and whatever you're saying, it comes across where the music kind of complements the mood and it complements the topic, the specific scene. It's not even It's not even the film more broadly, but I think down to the conversations, the kind of minute details. I feel the sort of general atmosphere is, it's, I think, as obviously, as an artist, it's, you never want to distract from what's happening. You kind of just want to complement the atmosphere, right, and just engage the
Totally.
user with
Yeah,
the music, right?
it really depends. Generally, you're right. I think you want to be, they say the best composer is neutral, I guess, um, but it really depends on what you're looking for. There are times where you want to push
Mhm.
the emotions, and it's necessary, and the filmmaker expects you to.
Yeah.
And there are times where you want to back off, you know. You have to feel that it's a give, you know. There are conversations that might be so important that you might just, the director might say, what are you going to score under this? And you could say, really, I don't feel like it means anything. Like, if
Mhm.
we really want to hear this, this is the epic part of the film, and it's. So it really depends. Yeah.
Mhm. So I think since we've, I guess, touched briefly on the filmmaking and I'm Not Alone, I'd like to slightly pivot more on the political side, which obviously you've also been almost, I guess, equally as involved in throughout your career and your life. So since the premiere of I'm Not Alone in 2018, about the Velvet Revolution in Armenia and when Pashinyan became prime minister, obviously a lot has happened since then. I guess on brighter notes, President Joe Biden in the United States recognized the Armenian genocide, which was huge. But then I guess at the same time, I think a lot of this was overshadowed by far darker tones that happened in the Caucasus and Nagorno-Karabakh, with obviously the war and with Azerbaijan and Turkey and the ceasefire and all the implications. So I was just wondering, from your perspective as both as an Armenian, as an activist, I guess what are your maybe general thoughts, and where do you see yourself as an activist kind of going forward with whatever's happening in this part of the world right now?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, Harry. But I can say that, when we made the film, obviously the revolution in Armenia, the Velvet Revolution, was in 2018 between April and May. And, we made the film and we tried to, we wanted to release it by the anniversary, but we were trying to get into all these film festivals. So TIFF, as you remember, was in 2019 and whenever TIFF is, October, November, I
In
guess.
September.
And September, yeah, exactly. So we got into TIFF, and then we've won 12 awards from different film festivals with this film. So it did the whole circuit, and because of that, it was still going. And we actually had a large streaming company purchase the film rights, but I can't name them. But because of the war, and right after the war, it became an issue for them to release. So it's really interesting for me to look at a historical event, because obviously we made a documentary, not a narrative film,
Mhm.
and take it forward a few years and then just see, how people's reaction have changed based on the theme of the film, or the protagonists in the film, I should say, and how that affects the film and its viewing. And it's mind blowing to me that, irrespective of how people may feel post, post war with the current Armenian government, that they would denigrate a documentary film about a part of Armenian history just 2 years ago, where everyone was united. Everyone, not 100% maybe, but most of the Armenian nation was incredibly inspired by the change away from the corrosive, corruptive system that basically, oligarchic system that ran Armenia since the early 90s, since the independence from the Soviet Union. And I couldn't, I have a hard time understanding how people can't make the distinction and say, well, that was then in time, and that was a beautiful time. And I think the world should know about that, but they should also know about the war in Artsakh and how Azerbaijan and Turkey, using Syrian mercenaries, attacked the peaceful, democratic republic of Artsakh, these people living on their indigenous lands for thousands of years during COVID of all times, and created havoc, humanitarian catastrophe, thousands of deaths, et cetera, et cetera. And now the fallout from that is the loss of territory for Armenia. Um, POWs, Armenian POWs, still in Azerbaijan, being randomly put through kangaroo courts and imprisoned, kept in prison. Our Azerbaijani soldiers on Armenian soil because of the kind of, change in demarcation and going back to Soviet maps between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's a fucking mess, and a lot of it is being blamed on the current government, which I understand, and current government has made a lot of mistakes, no question. Whether it's with the war or after the war, I mean, I'm not protecting anyone here, but I still don't understand how you can denigrate a part of history where we were all united, where it was very special, especially because it's got a universal message. I am not alone. We've always said has a key, a magical key, and that key is the unique success of decentralized civil disobedience that occurred during the Velvet Revolution, that the revolutionaries accidentally stumbled upon. It's not something they even devised, and it worked. And movements, democratic movements, can definitely benefit from that key, that unique key of decentralized civil disobedience. And that's why we've really been wanting to put out the film for years and have been, dealing with all these impediments, stumbling blocks, and difficulties. But here we are releasing the film, so I'm glad
Yeah.
it's out.
So I guess I loved how you ended that answer, because I think it actually ties very well into what I wanted to get into now, which was, so when you're talking about this key, which was, I guess, the core of the revolution and what was unique about it. So I found this, I actually stumbled from off your Twitter page. You had shared a New York Times article, which had, I guess, done some kind of review of, it was, I think, a look back at a revolution, it was called. And I think, I guess, you didn't agree with the author's premise. And then I'm reading this article, and I guess I was, a little bit bewildered. I think, at least the paper with the reputation of the New York Times, how they could, I think, so kind of incomprehensibly connect the events of, of the revolution and everything that Pashinyan was doing to this, Donald Trump situation, this Capitol Hill riot in January.
That made no sense, especially because of the chronology more than anything else.
Mhm.
It kind of made it sound like, how could the prime minister of Armenia have suggested people protest the judicial system within that country after seeing what happened in the Capitol riots? But that was 2 years before.
Right.
And not just that, but those same riots happened within Armenia at the end of the war, where people stormed the
Mhm.
capital in Armenia, asking for the prime minister's resignation a week before the Capitol riots in the US, which is even more weird.
Yeah. So I guess off of that, do you think, is there, I think, more broadly, maybe a disconnect between how the American or the mainstream media views and covers issues in relating to Armenian
I think it just, whoever, the author probably, I'm guessing, didn't research enough to really, I mean, it was a quickie, I guess. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of that they didn't. But is there a disconnect? Sure. I mean, most Americans don't know where Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh is. When the war was happening, they didn't understand. It was very difficult to explain to people what was going on, where these territories were, why it was important, for indigenous Armenians living there for thousands of years that had never, to
Mhm.
live on their own lands and maintain their independence. Why, Azerbaijan, run by a, dictator, basically an oil-rich dictator, is really causing all this havoc, along with partners Erdogan, who is a dick and a dictator. Um, he's a dictator. He's a double dictator. Um, so it's
Yeah.
just, it was really hard explaining it to people, and um, we were also fighting the well-established bot system set up by Azerbaijan to, to penetrate social media and to
Mhm.
threaten any other influencers who may post even the slightest kind of piece for Armenia or something like that. they were being
Yeah,
attacked.
like if I recall,
Elton John was so bad.
someone was a sort of well-known and established, it was like Elton John. He posted something supportive of Armenia, and he was like flooded with these messages, and he rescinded. I mean,
Well,
it's
when I researched it, I realized that what they did was they started a campaign of affecting his businesses. So they would like go and leave thousands of negative reviews. In other words, they would abuse the online world to denigrate the income of the artist rather than just, uh, rather than just commenting online.
yeah,
They did that obviously, but they were doing that to affect people's. It was very brutal, ugly, classless, and expected. So, I mean, with System of a Down, our goal with putting out those two songs last year, "Protect the Land" and "Genocidal Humanoids," was to break through that, you know, bot campaign, military bot campaign that Azerbaijan had started, so that people understand what's really going on. And we made a video, and it really had an impact. We saw the impact literally, based on viewership, based on what was going on at the time with the war. It made we cut through their bullshit machine basically
mhm.
for a little bit, and that was important. Um, I guess Armenia was ill prepared. Artsakh was ill prepared for this onslaught. Um, Obviously, they were using Turkish drones, very capable drones that flew 30,000 feet and were killing people. Most Armenian soldiers never saw the enemy, and if they survived and lost limbs, they never even saw an enemy.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
remember
really,
this
really
was the last time we talked was when you released this new music briefly with the System of a Down. I think
that's
this
right.
was sort of an almost perfect kind of maybe representation of your career. It was like this intersection of your musical penchants and your talents with the political activism you've always been involved in for such an important cause.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you. Yeah, so anyway, we have talked about it, so no point in going back there.
yeah.
But yeah,
Well, thank you, Serj. I think this, I guess, wraps up the topics I want to touch on. So thank you so much for your time.
perfect, brother. Thank you. Thank you for your time as well, and thank you for the interest. It's good seeing you again, brother.